Hi, this is Michael Schmalley, and I'm starting a little RTFM series on Maschine and Maschine Studio since that's the controller I'm using. Um, Basically, this is to solidify what I've learned by reading through the manual a couple times and just to disseminate some information in a logical way. I'm a programmer, so I am pretty regimented about how I learn new stuff. It seems to work. It's worked for the last 10 years, so hopefully some others can benefit from this kind of thought process of going through the manual. I know it might be alien to some, but sometimes the manual is the best place to really understand things. Um, Sometimes you don't need to read the manual, but when you have programs like this that have controllers and you got menus and keys and then combinations that relate on a controller, it's probably a good idea. I know I skipped a manual once before in my younger days and then realized there was about half of the hardware sequencer that I didn't really even know existed. Okay, so we have Maschine here, and basically the reason I like Maschine and am really getting addicted to it is, well, basically two reasons. One, it's a groove box, and it's just like the MC series. It's like the Electribe. It's a groove box in that it doesn't use a linear sequencer. It's loop based, pattern based, scene based, song based, however you want to say it. That's like the Korg and the Rolands back in the day, except it's not limited to hardware, processing, CPU, or memory. So you don't get the huge disses of this. Like, one of my favorites was the MC series, because in the 90s when I used the MC 505 I have right now anyway, just as a nostalgia, it I liked it because it was a self-contained unit. I wasn't a professional producer back then worrying about massive sound and stuff. So to me, it was more of an instrument, and that I could combine all these things together, and that's what Maschine allows. Is it's an instrument that you can really build blocks of music to then assemble in your DAW of choice or whatever. So we'll turn on the controller. That's pretty trippy, huh? Okay, basically, this first video is going to quickly explain the basic principles and concepts of Maschine. The fundamental building blocks that you need to understand, or else you just will kind of be hunting and pecking for stuff. Okay, the first is the browser, and all sequencers, all synthesizers, they have a browser that loads up patches or whatever. Um, the search icon gives that to you, and it's the libraries and files tabs. I don't even really use the files because I like keeping things. I like this search-based, tag-based. Okay, browser is the front end for accessing all elements in a project. The projects, the groups, the sounds, the instruments, the effects, and the samples. And Maschine browser has two modes. It has factory mode for native instruments, bundles like complete, and then it has user mode, which has all the saved stuff for a user in your user directory, like your documents folder, wherever it saves it. Okay, now the first major section is a project, and the project is a song, and a song is a project. On the hardware sequencer, you have songs that assemble patterns and have patches. Basically, Maschine has the project, and the project is your song. You can't have, like Ableton. I'm familiar with that. You can have a live set and have projects within that. You can't have that in Maschine. It's one file to song. And a project contains all the data needed for your song to play, whether it's looping, playing live, with your scenes, or using it as a library and grabbing MIDI, or, rendering out wave loops, which is another powerful feature of this program. Okay, the next sub-level we have is the groups. And a group contains 16 sound slots, so a group is your pads, 16. And each group can have its own insert effects. So it can, you can load a compressor or a bus compressor or a maximizer on a group and affect all of its children's sounds, the 16 sounds in the pads. And it can hold an infinite amount of patterns, which I guess in pre-2 of Maschine, you were limited to 16 patterns per group, I think. I don't know. I never used the version before this. Okay. And then you get down to the smallest piece, and that is a sound. And the sounds are the building blocks of all sound content. And what a sound is a sound is Maschine's idea of a preset. Okay? So a sound will always hold a plug-in, Native Instruments calls it, or a VST. So when you go to define a sound, you can either load one from your library, or you click and load a Native Instruments bundle sound. That's what this is, or external. I don't have very many externals. I'm trying to keep my setup simple, learn what I've got. And then all these are effect sounds. And then so the default Maschine plugin is a sampler, which obviously will load a WAV file or compatible. And then you have the drum synth. So you have two internal plugins. Now, the interesting thing is that you can add your plugin. So, if you want to just, add, you got your kick. And then a sound, you can stack effects. So you can put a compressor on that. And then you could put a delay. You wouldn't put a delay on a kick, but and then you can save this as a preset, and then it will be loaded in your user sounds library, which you can recall later. And the cool thing is that when you save this sound, save, it will then save all your settings here, and it can save your patterns on top of that. So it's a cool feature for, like I said, it's the preset feature. Now, when you originally look at this, you think of sound as, the core, but one fundamental thing to understand is that, like I said earlier, is that you have instruments. And when I first started Maschine, I was really trying to figure out what the difference between an instrument and a sound was. And, it really occurred to me that, okay, instruments are, Native Instruments bundles, like complete with massive, all this stuff I have complete. So if you don't have complete, you won't see this stuff. But it has, all the instruments are the actual presets in these synths. So if you have if you have presets in Massive or FM8, that is what actually shows up down here when you are drilling down into what you want. They're just presets, so they're not a sound. In the instruments, you're not going to have any effects, or any settings saved. you're gonna be loading an instrument straight into here. So, if I picked massive and picked one out of here, you can see that when it loads up, we've actually loaded the VST massive in here, but it has the preset of massive, this patch, end of beginning, and that will show up in, the standalone or a VST of massive loaded in a DAW, but it doesn't have any effects like a sound can save. But if I added a beat delay to this and a reverb, okay, I could then go and save this stack as a sound. And then, along with all my settings, if I customize this massive actual patch, I would get the effects to use down the road to bring into a different group. And so you can see now how the sound is the first preset level, and then the group, you can bundle a bunch of your custom sounds. So, it's a real quick way, on those rainy days when you really want to organize stuff, of really, getting some, if you make certain genres of, music, like tech house or, trance, whatever, you can make your own kits and have effects, because the way that groups are made, you can have rhythm mixed with effects. It takes practice, but you don't have to. I see a lot of people where they have one group to one group to one group of certain different things, but you can really, once you understand, the organization of Maschine, you can kind of compact, your kits to where you could have 3 different things going on in here. You have simple rhythm parts where you have kick, clap, hat, cymbal, and then you have some stabs and a couple, go-to synths that you have in massive or absinthe. Then you have some pads like an absinthe. So you could have one group that you kind of could create a whole song from, a minimal, or loops if that's what you're doing. Okay. So then that's the sound, the patch part of massive, a massive Maschine. So you have the sound part, and then you have the MIDI data part. Okay, so each sound has its own piano roll. Okay, so the pattern is connected. Right now we don't have a pattern, so you have to go and make one. So this drop down, this will be covered later. We've created a pattern now in Group A1. So now the pattern can be edited. So we can go in the piano roll and make, we can put stuff in there for the kick, which the kick, since it's, a mono, we could not have to use the piano roll and just put some notes in here. Okay. Now the pattern is the next level. So you have the MIDI events, and then you have the MIDI events contained within a pattern. And so each group in the scene arranger up here will have a pattern selected from each group in each scene. And the important part to know here is that the scene's length is dictated by the longest pattern length. So if I make a pattern in this new group and I change the length to 4, you're going to see that now the first group is looped 4 times. Okay, so we have MIDI events, then we have the patterns, the full pattern, and there will be 16 tracks in a pattern, quote unquote, in the group, the sounds. And then we have the patterns, the selected patterns of the group in each scene, which you define, and which can be looped, played live, whatever. This is where a lot of people have a really hard time arranging stuff. Okay, that does it for the first basics. That's the basics of Maschine right there. And I'll be back with more. Thank you.